From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
You know, one of the things that drew me as a young man to Unity was really its name. I loved its name. I love unity. We need unity in the world. Unity stands for oneness. And from the time I was a little tyke, I can't remember when I didn't think in terms of, I was probably in my early grade schools, that I even had this notion about the importance of and the significance of oneness in the world and oneness with people. And I'd ask questions about that of people who were different and in other lands. And I cherish that teaching of oneness, the importance of establishing a bond with ourselves, coming to know the truth of ourselves, and from that, establishing oneness with all others and with all elements of life, for everything is alive. And of course, our oneness with God, our oneness with the cosmos, our oneness with it all. And it's a powerful thing, and that's what we're here to learn, and that's what really heals the world, is individuals who are embraced in that process. So nothing could be more important than, you know, investing in the bond you have with the source that gave you life. Because whether you know it or not, you made an agreement when you came here to enter into a oneness with that presence that would then show you who you really are, and you would be able to not only behold it in yourself, but behold it in all others, and as a result, you would be able to connect with them, love them, because you were able to love yourself because you knew the truth of who you were. It's very, very important, that whole dynamic. And so in Unity, it was about the idea that we love and accept one and all, is the idea of unity, that we're all one. It was very important to me, and when I found Unity, that really rang a bell in me. And I love that the approach is that we are always looking for good, looking for the good everywhere, in everything, and in everyone. And that's an important aspect of life, because God is good, and God dwells within you, and God is everywhere. And life is a perception that is supposed to be growing and expanding, healing, perfecting, purifying. And so as we do, really, the masters and the mystics, those who have gone deep, there isn't any place they can look and not see God. And so that's a powerful dimension as well. And I love the clarity that was brought in Unity. For me, Unity brought clarity to the teachings of Jesus Christ, and which are the main teachings of Unity. Jesus is our elder brother, our way shower, and his teachings were about oneness. And I resonate with those, and I resonate with those passages that speak to oneness, because they're so pure, and they're very, very powerful, and they're often couched in prayers to God that we would come to have and know and experience the oneness with the source that he had come to know. That was his prayer for all of us. And so it's not a small thing. And I also love that we honor and accept other teachings and other paths, and in particular being willing to look for the universal truths that exist and that may have even existed prior to Jesus' time on earth. That truth didn't suddenly drop in when Jesus arrived. Truth has always been. As long as we've had a God, there has been the truth of God. There has been the reality with a capital R. And so there are hints and signs and things that existed prior to Jesus that are often worthy of notice and incorporating into our lives, and just knowing that some of these teachings resonate from prior to, and that Jesus amplified them and helped us remember them again and brought them to the forefront, truths that had existed previous even. And you know, it's interesting. I think it's important to me also that we, as a ministry and as a teaching, encourage people to be open to inquire, to explore, to question. That's important, that one not be discouraged from that or put in fear in any way. I've talked to people who have said they even grew up in a place where, or a ministry where it was taught that it was a sin to even go inside another church. which would be kind of sad. And also it reflects the idea of separation. And separation is the opposite of oneness. And so again, anything in the world that moves us toward honoring each other, loving each other, accepting each other. We all have individual choices, and God has not asked for sameness. We are unique, and we are meant to be unique in our own selves, yet love one another for our uniqueness and who we are. No two snowflakes are alike, and no individuals are alike. We're not asked to be exactly the same. And so that's the challenge, I think, of loving in a broad way. You know, Unity said, and the way I heard it was that we are one way to God, now, not that we are the only way. And that was important to me. That was refreshing. And I think that no single entity has the corner on truth. Everyone has a bit of the truth. And therefore, people at different places in their unfoldment and journey resonate with how it's being said, where it's being said, the manner in which it is. And so that's why what's right for you may be not right for me. What's right for me may not be right for you. And that's why it's important to honor people wherever they may be. And that's one of the things that we teach. That again allows for oneness versus separation. People who get into saying, I'm right and you're wrong, immediately we're apart. There's the me and the not me. There's what you think or what I think. And our mind does all kinds of exercises, oftentimes, to argue for separation. And that's not what it's about. And that's not what God is about. And that's not what Jesus and all the masters and mystics were about in terms of bringing us to an awareness that it's all one. And when we're in that place, it's magical, it's mystical, it's joyous. Your heart opens. There's given no sense or reason for conflict. And so it's something that we are all striving for on this journey. Now, many of you know in recent years that I've spent, time on my own in personal growth, going to various places, spiritual deepening, traveling to whether it's Brazil or to India. I've gone a number of times and taken courses, as you know, and taken people on pilgrimages, as the one I've just returned from, and simply to explore various peoples and cultures and traditions and find commonality. I love that. It feeds my soul. Because then I see the nuances that bring us together, not the things that are different. And that empowers me to say, once again, we're all children of God. There is one God, really. But there are universal principles and universal teachings that bring us together that are powerful on this journey. And most recently I've returned from Bali, Indonesia, with a group of 60 people. I was one of the leaders on that. I was honored to be part of. And people often tell me in the congregation that when I return from places like this, that it's meaningful to them for me to share some of what was learned or gained, because obviously not everyone's able to go. And so hopefully I can bring back sometimes a little bits and pieces that give you a taste of the value that was gained. And so there are some things that I learned really that jumped out at me in this travel. In Bali, you'll find a people and a culture that is one of the most friendly that you will come across in the world. There's an energy in Bali. It's an island, and we stayed for a time in Nusa Dua. I reversed it. Nusa Dua, which is the southern end of the island, and then Ubud was where we spent more time actually, and that's the northern and really nature-oriented. But they're both beautiful, and it was great, and the people were wonderful, and actually smiling is kind of a spiritual virtue there. And it's genuine. They radiate a friendliness and a warmth. Friendliness is actually a life principle. They're taught that. And happiness is an intention in which they enter every day. Happiness is something that they seek to express, to extend, to invite you into, and they do it with a smile, and they do it with warmth, and they all say hello. I don't care if you are walking early on the grounds of a hotel and somebody's raking leaves, he would always stop, he or she, and would never fail to look at you and smile and say good morning, and it was heart-filled and it was genuine and you felt it and you connected with them. If you walked along the beach, there were people there that were Balinese people, and some might even be security early in the mornings, just planted along different places. Always the same expression. All the people in the businesses and in the restaurants and in the hotels, of course, you'd think that would be natural, but you never get it like that energetically as you do in Bali. So it was like a powerful place to be, and to see that it could be genuinely instilled in the people from childhood on up. A beautiful, beautiful thing. And happiness is said to be a cure for the world's problems. Stop and think about it. If everyone in the world would be happy, where would the problems be? Nobody would be harming anyone. There'd be no reason to be upset. Everybody is happy. There'd be no war. You ever thought about that? It seems like a simple answer, but it's true. It's certainly not easy to get to, because, people would have to have all their needs met, of at least food, shelter, and that type of thing. And there's much of the world that doesn't have it. And a lot of, people move into unhappiness in various forms and degrees over various kinds of lack. A lack that they feel they have within themselves, or a lack of opportunity, or a lack of whatever. And it causes the people then to step into the role of feeling that they're a victim. And then from there, they become resentful. They may become envious of others, jealous of others. They may want to blame the world or someone around them for their situation and dilemma, and they attack externally or even internally. It creates stories in the mind that builds a sense of conflict, and eventually they may want to act out. When you eliminate all that, which is a big task, when people are happy. And so all I'm saying is that, for God's sakes, be happy. We have so much to be grateful for, we really do. And yes, we have challenges and problems, but they're there for us to learn and grow through. Bali is a land of 10,000 temples, and the truth is that's not even close. There are more than that. Everywhere you look, there's a temple. You're walking along the beach, there's temples that you can step into. As you drive down most every street, there are temples everywhere. And there are places where they sell various ornamentation and so forth to create your temple at your home. They have altars at the front doors of businesses and homes that fresh flowers are put out for every day. There's that connection with the divine every single day, that sense of a bond that they are making. It's very deep and built into the framework. And there are the compounds where they live. They have different, here's where the bedroom is, and they're like separate little structures within a compound that's walled. And you always see rising high the temples everywhere in all these places. And they have village temples then, and community temples, and temples on temples. And it's an amazing thing. And some of them, many of them are ancient and carry the energies of people who've been worshiping for 1,000 years and beyond. Now, Bali is 80% Hindu, and Hinduism came from India on into Indonesia, and so it has a few differentials, but basically it has the religious basics and scriptures and literature of Hinduism. And we had two wonderful guides who were with us the whole time, traveling to each temple that we went to, and back and forth, and on excursions to other places as well. And their names were Hari and Yenta. And they're beautiful, beautiful souls. And we connected with them. And we had two buses because we had 60 people. And so we had one in each bus. And they would tell us about the culture and about the spirituality and their religion and their message, and answer questions. And it was very, very informative. And people fell in love with them. And I researched a book while I was even on the trip, studying Balinese and studying Hinduism a bit there. And it was interesting that even the Balinese people find their religion a little bit difficult to understand, that they depend on priests and scholars that are there for what they don't understand. They're always learning. They're very much into ritual, and ritual connects them, and they feel that connection to the divine through the many different rituals that the priests offer. And based on my research, the main fundamental phenomenon that they're confronted with from the Balinese perspective is that of opposing powers. opposing powers. It was interesting to discover that. And they say that basically a person is meant to gain some kind of balance between the realities of good and evil, life and death, positive and negative, and that you can't really choose one or the other, but balance in between, kind of find a middle ground. And of course, you're familiar with probably having heard that there's the Hindu triad of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And they represent the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer. And together, those three make up really the one almighty God. And so you have God as creator of all things. And then there is the aspect of God that is the preserver, preserves the good, preserves the consciousness that you want to move toward, that reflects the truth of God. And then there's the aspect of the destroyer, which actually could represent the idea that we have having to do with release, letting go, detachment of that which does not serve us and is not aligned with the truth. So they see the universe divided into three levels. The upper world is God and heaven, and then the middle world is the earth and human beings having their experience, and then the underworld of darkness and devils, okay? And so they see human beings as always kind of positioned then between heaven and hell, between good and evil, and always having to balance and gain a balance between these opposing powers. And then they say the result of that balance is harmony. Well, in unity, I just want to say that, we wouldn't agree with that. We say there is no opposing power to God. There is one presence. We say it every week. One presence and one power, God the good, all right? In this church, in you, in me, and that's the one reality with a capital R. And so that which is not good in the world is basically the result of humanity's separation in consciousness from the one true reality of good, all right? And so the way we have anything show up, which is an absence of good, is darkness is the absence of light. Evil is the absence of good. And basically it's all this energy that we have, life energy, we're given free will, and therefore through the filters of every individual's consciousness, they have the energy of God moving through them for good or for not good. And basically it's like electricity. You can use that energy, it's unseen until it's brought into expression. And that electricity that's unseen can light a city or it can electrocute a person. So it's all in how you channel the energies of God. It's not God that's doing it, it's how it's coming through humanity and the choices that they're making at the level of consciousness that they're living from. And that's why it's so important to be a light in the world, to foster this kind of friendliness, this incredible energy that I experienced in Bali. That was an example of it, and to be, really living from the bond of oneness and knowing who you are on a daily basis, and getting up knowing that you're entering this world to be a friend to the world, to be a friend to your neighbor, to be a friend to the coworker that you can't get along with, that you can learn from. And it's a very, very powerful thing. And so Jesus said, the Father and I are one. And the result of that is love and a sense of goodness and oneness. And that's what we're all striving to be about. And, there's a lot in Hinduism, and, I hesitate to go into it all, but, it's good to know historically that these teachings existed some thousands of years before Jesus even walked the earth. And that's something that is called the Vedas. There were the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and all that. Well, the Vedas date back to, according to this particular book, 10,000 to 7,000 years before Jesus. And just imagine that the truth, God was revealing the truth at that time, way back, and that the Vedas actually evolved into the Upanishads. You've heard of that, and they are basically texts which were written about 800 to 500 BC, and they brought into writing to preserve some of these teachings around the nature of man, the nature of the universe, and of God. And so they are eternal truths that these Vedic seers, they were called rishis, and they were sages and seers that would go very, very deep in meditation and into deep, deep states of consciousness, and they would develop the powers to see beyond the physical phenomena. And then they would report these things, and they made them into hymns and songs, and they were passed on from generation to generation in memorization of songs. And there were 1,000 to 2,000 of them that were passed down for several thousand years before they were then compiled so that they could be preserved. And you know, they were said to be not speculative. They were based on divine revelation that came through these individuals, these rishis. And the rishis made claims that were so cosmic, and even modern physics has said to have to be catching up to what it was that they revealed from these deep states. For, you know, they discovered the dual motion of the Earth, that not only was the Earth spinning, but it was also rotating around the sun. They also studied the courses of constellations and stars way, way back. And they founded the twin sciences of astronomy and astrology. They perfected a system of medicine, Ayurvedic, for the welfare of the body. And they evolved the science of yoga, for the health of the mind, that is still being, used today, of course. It is said that they evolved the most perfect language in the world, Sanskrit, with the scientific alphabet. So there is a great deal that went on there. Now, the Upanishads, are, as I say, they were written around 500 to 800 BC, and they represent the essence of the Vedas. After the hymns and singing of this and memorization was passed down and finally formulated, and they're said to be humanity's most profound philosophical inquiry. Okay? And at the first, I love this, the first perceptions, they were the first perceptions of the unity of all, the unity of all life, the oneness of man and God. These were the first perceptions that came through. And for me, it validates the emphasis that we have, again, in unity, this great truth that even cosmically they had grasped from deep, deep states many, many years prior. Ancient, sacred truths, and that there is the unity of all and the oneness of man and God. So we could never spend too much time on talking about, reflecting, and feeling, and knowing, and experiencing the allness of oneness and the oneness of man and God. How often do we know that? How often do we quietly reflect on that? It's so sacred, so powerful, so ancient, and so important. And so the basic teachings of the Upanishad is that the essence of all beings, from the blade of grass to the perfect human being and all things, is the divine spirit. And they called it Brahman, but we call it spirit. And the spirit of God, the one intelligence, the one presence and power, is in all life, from the blade of grass to the human being. And so everywhere you look, it's all God. It's all alive with God. And the Upanishads focus on philosophical questions such as the purpose of life, the origin of the universe, concepts of time, space, and matter, as well as what they refer to as the concepts of Maya, M-A-Y-A, which is, they say, their word for the illusion of a limited physical, mental reality in which our everyday consciousness becomes entangled. You get that? We get entangled in limitation with our consciousness. That's Maya. And it is the veiling of the true self. They call it the true self versus, your separate self. We've created a separate self that separates us from the true reality of who we are and what life is, and the God that is in everything and everyone. And that's something that we're here to grow into. And it requires us talking about it because it's a journey, it's a destination. We're not going to get there maybe today or maybe tomorrow, but it's good to explore some of these things and where it began and why it's there. And that you and I are here today because we have a divine appointment to remember that this exists and has existed for thousands of years, and we've been called to it. The Upanishads recognizes God as the universal being, and that all things have emanated from him, are part of him, will mingle in him, and have no separate existence. I love that. Here we're talking about oneness. There is no separate existence from God of anything. Now we get lost in thinking by creating a separate self. I love that. You getting on with this stuff? Are you with me? Have I lost you? Okay. So these things were taught in the Upanishads, and in hundreds of stories and legends are woven into them. But anyway, they teach and convey that the universe and all being proceeds from the one God, live in him, are part of him, and end in him. And that each soul has its beginning in like a universal soul. In other words, there's like it's talk of that we're all a cell in the mind of God, and that we're part of this universal soul. And so each individual is, in the end, merging with God. So, Jesus prayed a prayer along these lines of oneness, and it's found in the Gospel of John. He prayed that they, meaning you and me, all may be one as your Father, as you, Father, are in me. Now let me say that again. That they, meaning you and me, all may be one as you, Father, are in me, and I in you. That they may be one in us. That the world may believe that you have sent me, meaning that you have sent me to share the importance of this truth, you see. And then he talks about the seed of God, and that there is the true self, the seed of God in every person. And we call it the Christ. Paul called it the Christ in you. Anyway, Jesus continues and says, and the glory which you gave me, speaking to God, I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one, I and them, you and me, that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. The Bali group was a powerful group. We melded together in oneness, and it was a powerful thing, and probably some of it was the Balinese energies rubbing off on us. But, I sent some pictures to a couple that were in the group from Paris, France, and they sent back a note appreciating the pictures, but this is something that the gal said. She said, what a wonderful time that was. I'm so grateful and appreciative of the experience. I came away with many gifts. My intention since my re-entry into the Western world's atmosphere is to continue to be Bali. I love that, to be Bali. So that's her intention, to keep smiling, to remember to be friendly, to live from the heart, to stay in the moment, to love and be about love and oneness, because that's who we are. So I bring back to you a little bit of Bali, a little bit of a taste of it, but just maybe you have gotten some insight into also wanting to set the intention to be Bali. I hope so. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.